Hey guys, today we are talking reverbs, delays, time-based processors. Um, Time-based processors cover a lot of different tools, of course, reverb, delay, but tools like phasing, chorus, modulation tools like that, flangers, those are all considered time-based processors, and we can look at what a few of those sound like, okay? I have a little track that I built here inside Cubase. Let's take a listen. Okay, it's just a 4-bar loop that goes over and over and over again. Now, when you're using reverb, I have all these instruments pretty dry so that we can really hear the effects of using reverb and delay and things like that to make a track more interesting and dynamic and give it some vibe. But you don't want to go overkill with reverb. You really want to have a plan of how you're going to use it and know what you're doing. Otherwise, you can really make a mix muddy and have instruments get lost and cause all kinds of problems with your mix. So with that being said, let's take a look at the drums, okay? So the drums I have totally dried out. Drums are inside an instrument called Groove Agent by Steinberg, by the way. It looks like this. And I'll show you what my pattern looks like so you can take a look at that. And just a little kind of trap kind of beat. Okay, something we're all pretty familiar with. Now, I also have a little bit of tape saturation going to give it some character. And I also have the drums going to a parallel compressor down here, and I have the bass going down to a parallel compressor too, just to help them stand out in the mix. Now let's talk about a little bit of reverb to give the drums a little bit of vibe, because they sound cool as they are, but they're a little bit flat and just need a little bit of life. So I created an FX track, and let's just look at this very normal looking, I wouldn't say boring, but it's just kind of a very conventional reverb from Steinberg. And these kinds of reverbs, you may see different ones. All DAWs have them, and they all look different, but they all have similar functions. So the first one is pre-delay, and this is how much time between the time the transient hits and the reverb starts. And again, in thinking about trying to keep your mix from getting muddy, adding a little bit of pre-delay is a great way to allow that transient attack to take place without having a bunch of reverb washing around it. So it just allows a little bit of space, and you can also give it almost like an echo sound. And then our tail is how long that tail is going to go. So if we want a short tail, meaning how long the reverb is going to go, we can bring it down. If we want a really long, drenching kind of reverb, we can make that big. The type of reflection is based on algorithm. They have hall, chamber, which is going to be more of like a medium-sized room, and then studio, which is usually much drier, okay? So those are different algorithms that the creators put together for you to base your reverb. So that's kind of your overall sound, but then these other parameters are going to control how much of various elements are going to be there. Okay, so let's just hear what this sounds like. Let me make sure it's attached. It is. Now you can hear the drums immediately get lost, right? Because there's so much reverb on it that you can't really hear it in the mix, and that's not a good thing. We want the drums to really stick out, not be buried underneath a bunch of reverb. So some of these other controls, we can control how much low frequency is going to get reverb, how much high frequency is going to get reverb, because in a lot of cases, you may not want the kick to get so much reverb because it really will get lost. You might only want just a little bit of sizzle way up in the high end. So it just depends on the mix and what you're trying to do. So you can control some of those things. So we can listen, and I'll mess with these controls up here. So there, now the kick has a lot of reverb on it. We can kind of make that. And then we can do the same thing. So, and this is which frequency are we honed in on. Okay, and then our early reflections are controlling the type of effect it's going to have early on and how big that room is going to be. And then the tail, so think of this as kind of your attack decay, and then this is more your sustain release side of the reverb, and it kind of shows you a little picture. So this is your initial phase of the reverb, and then this is how long the tail is going to be. And again, we can control what frequencies are really going to be affected by this. So if we don't want a bunch of kick in the early reflection, I can make it and then our tail, you know, we can mess with that. And I had actually already messed with this, so let's take a listen to this. This one is, I've already kind of made it sound the way I want it. Okay, so I swapped it out. I muted that first one, and I opened up this other one. Okay, so, and I can, it's a matter of debate how much of that I would want in my mix. Here's my, over here is going to determine how much of the effect is in the mix. Is it going to be all 100%? But again, my drums will get lost, so I probably wanted something more in the 20 or 30% range. Let's see what that sounds like in context. Now that sounds pretty cool. I like that. That's great. So we can emulate rooms, but there's also a type of reverb called plate reverb. And I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but here's plate reverb, a plate reverb plugin. And a plate reverb basically sends the sound through a large metal plate, and there's different, and this is just one of the many out there. And there's different density plates that will give you different sound. There's also, you know, like here's a Abbey Road Chambers is another one that's going to let you emulate different room shapes and sizes that you can try to emulate. Okay. And they all, you know, if you look at all of these, I have so many reverbs I could show you, but you know, it looks totally different. But here's your pre-delay, here's your blend, here's your how much treble, here's how dampened for the plate if you want it to be a shorter tail essentially, and then your input and output. So you may mess with how much is going in and out, but a lot of the same kinds of tools as the other one we were looking at. Okay, so I've got my reverb on the drums set up. Let's talk a little bit about delay. So now on this, it's called apricot pop. It's kind of a little arpeggiating pattern. Now delay, you may consider with reverb and delay, you know, you may not need a reverb. You might want to use a delay instead, because you can really control how much, again, to prevent your mix from getting too muddy. So I have this stereo delay, and stereo delay basically means I can have two different delays happening at the same time. Now with a delay, you can have it based on time, meaning how frequently is it going to repeat back, and then your feedback is is how much it's going to do, and then your mix is how much in context with the dry signal is there going to be. So let me turn this one, turn these guys off, and we'll just make this dry so that you're just hearing the one delay. Okay, and then yeah. Now if we hit sync, what it's going to do, it's going to switch it to, instead of being time-based, it's going to be based on the speed of the song, the tempo of the song. So if I put it on 16th notes, for example, you're not going to hear much because it's going exactly at the same speed as the rest of the notes, which will start to sound weird after a while. But with a guitar, that can be really cool. This will double the tempo, which that's kind of cool, right? Now, if we use that one, which is a really fast delay, with something slower and sweeping, so again, this is something that you can see how you could very easily get it very muddy, right? If we turn these up, it would just be a cacophony, right? So we don't want that. So we definitely need to have some self-control. But if you have a track that's like just a one guitar that's really going, like, you can do some really fun stuff with delay for sure. So let's hear what we've got so far. Now we have a delay going, and we have a little bit of reverb on our drums. Yeah, so that's cool. That's added a lot of life to our recording already, and we're just kind of getting started. Now I've got this, I call it my Bon Iver. I love Bon Iver keyboard from Massive that I kind of designed, and it's kind of almost has a DX sound, but it's got a lot of extra character. Now within your different virtual instruments, I have reverb, for example. Okay. But for the case of this lecture, I just turned that off so that we can look at some of the tools on the outside. So this is a really cool reverb called Shimmer from Valhalla. Valhalla makes cool stuff. And this reverb goes on for ages. It gives this really drenched sound, as you can see. Okay, and let's take a listen to it with Valhalla Shimmer on. It almost will turn whatever you put it on it like a synth pad kind of sound, right? And there's a few different ones. So again, this is a reverb, but it's like major effect. So in my next video, we'll use this, but obviously in the context of this song, it needs some extra work. Okay, so hold the thought on the Valhalla Shimmer. It's a really cool tool, but again, you have to be careful with how you use it. Okay, I have a flanger on this. Let's turn our flanger on. It's more of a modulation tool, but this is also considered a time-based processor. And it's gonna, and a flanger is this. The name flanger actually came from pushing down on the flange of the tape machine, and it would create this kind of sound. Okay, so you're kind of slowing down part of the sound. we can make it really. Usually this kind of thing you want slower. Okay, in context. I'm okay with that. I'm not crazy about it. What does this phaser sound like? Phaser is similar to a flanger, but it's putting the frequency through a different phasing kind of larger waveform, okay? And it's a lot of time it's kind of back and forth, and it can give you this sort of spacey perception. And again, we can same thing with the delay. We can make this either time based, or we can sync it with a certain note. Okay, so not crazy about that either, but I'm just showing you kind of what these different tools do. Okay, let's go back to the time-based, see what that sounds like. More of a slower sweeping phase can give a little bit of character to your sound. And you can use this on regular acoustic instruments, and you can use it on synth-based instruments too. And sometimes if you just put a little bit, it can be kind of nice. Just if you feel like something's a little boring, you can mess with some of these kinds of tools to give it a little character, right? Okay, so that's reverbs, delays, phaser, modulation. What else do we use? Flanger, little Valhalla shimmer. So in my next video, we will cover some more advanced tools that we can use related to time-based processors.